is one experience from your childhood that has profoundly shaped who you are today?
One experience only? I think growing up with parents that one had immigrated from Spain, and in the city that I grew up in, Southwest Detroit, having the experience of being around other people that looked like me, that spoke Spanish, that had similar family upbringing, that really the undertone along all of the public school education was, always strive better, always, try new things, seek out opportunities. I think growing up in that space and around like beautiful, creative people really shaped who how I wanted to become, or who I've become, or trying to become. Just because it was so colorful, diverse. We lived within, I felt like we lived within a city, or a community within a big city. And, our parents allowed us for having those outside experiences that, opened up many doors, many opportunities, not just kind of pigeonholed what type of person or what type of career we needed to take.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, too, growing up in a diverse community has such a monumental impact on who you become as a person, because you're not pigeonholed on one way of thinking. You get so many different perspectives, opinions, cultures that become a part of the melting pot of what is possible for your life, So you've been in the professional sports industry for now over a decade, starting with the Detroit Tigers organization, and then now working with what was previously known as Fox Sports Detroit, then Bally Sports, and now the name has been rebranded to
FanDuel Sports Network.
And what does that mean exactly? So what changes? What changes with that? And even before we go into that, I kind of want to revisit your time and experience at the Detroit Tigers organization, because when you started there, you started as an intern. I myself also started as an intern at the Detroit Tigers organization. And obviously, the program now today is very different than what it was back then. I feel like back then, we put a lot of sweat equity and a lot of time into that role. But I would assume that your transition from a intern into a marketing coordinator, and how that role progressed for you, like what was that experience like for you? What were some of the biggest takeaways from that experience?
To sum it up, it's, it was an experience that you kind of have this idea of what a company, or in this case, it was a team. Like I grew up a Detroit Tigers fan, grew up, our neighborhood, school field trips, or like park, we would go to Clark Park and I learned to play softball, and everything we talked about was the Tigers and baseball and softball. So I really always loved the team in general. So going through the process of applying, not thinking I'd ever even get accepted, to getting hired under the vice president of marketing at the time, Ellen Hilsring, and just getting the opportunity to learn. Like it did take, I'm not sure what the program entails now, but at the time, the internship was very much a chance for you to try all areas, not just marketing, because the marketing department did work closely with the promotions department, all the on-game or in-game activations, all the on-field, the anthem, the mascot, the activities, working with the players. I specifically, speaking Spanish, had the opportunity to work with a lot of players in the community, bringing Miguel Cabrera to Clark Park, bringing Omar Vizcal and Joaquin Benoit, and a bunch of different players that spoke Spanish and felt comfortable in those kind of communities, bringing them to, a space that may not have been even known or available before that. So that was a cool experience, and be able to do that. But even in doing that, I felt like there were a lot of times I questioned, like, something that was so known to me growing up in, just a couple miles down from the ballpark, or what Comerica Park now, and even closer when it was the Tiger Stadium on Trumbull, was I thought everybody felt and knew what we knew growing up in that neighborhood.
In what regard? What do you mean by that?
I felt that everyone knew how much the Tigers, how much a team really resonated, especially being Latinos, to a community that spoke Spanish, to a community that, was full of immigrants. And these players, they may not typically come from or are born in the U.S. So even just growing up around that, it felt like already that, you connected to someone because you were a fan of not just, how they played or the team itself, but it felt like family. It felt like, you knew that person. You knew that
pride,
it was
and
a
the
pride.
culture.
Yeah, it was definitely pride. So having the chance to become an intern and kind of be in that world, not gonna lie, like first day on the job, it was kind of like, whoa, like I'm here. Like this was not something we knew from the inside. It was always like, fan watching from the outside. So it was definitely a cool experience. I think
I'm curious about what the conversation was like between you and the vice president of marketing, Ellen, when she was interviewing you for the role. Were there questions about your culture? Were there questions about what ideas or thoughts you had about how to support and kind of tap into the Mexican community within Southwest Detroit? Because as you mentioned, the sport or the team is heavily dominated by Latino presence. A lot of the players are from Latin America, and that is a major sport in Latin America. In Southwest Detroit being so close to Tiger Stadium and then now Comerica Park, I would assume that there was a lot of conversations about what can we do to become the place or the event that all the families in these Latino communities wanted to go to and support and watch the games and learn about the players. Like, what was that conversation like between you and the head of the department at the time?
I think you asked two parts. So like, what was the conversation even before getting hired or like during?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would be curious to know, like, how do you prepare for something like that? Because it's so high pressure. It's so intimidating. It's such a big, well-known, recognized brand that even myself, I remember going for an interview at the Tigers and just feeling like almost a bit of imposter syndrome. Like I didn't belong there. I was lucky to be there. It was my privilege to be a part of their presence. So how did you approach that? And like, what was your experience in that moment?
Well, I didn't think there was, I think I learned that there were certain steps or certain, that's just one element of like so many of the things that they're, marketing. They're selling tickets. They're marketing the other players that may not be of, Latino descent. They're, marketing specific nights like theme nights, and just the game itself is its own operation. Like there's things, millions, billions of dollars at risk if these players aren't healthy and doing their job on the field. So I feel like there's so many different parts that like I didn't know coming in, that just what I knew growing up and my experience of like this rich culture, this colorful culture, this like connection and pride of being Latino, or even having that connection with a team just down the street. I didn't know that that was not something that everyone knew. I felt like throughout the years there, I kind of learned to bring my excitement about it. And my, they don't know. If you're not from that area, if you're not a part of that community, you're just not going to know, and you're not going to have any real tie or connection. I feel like affinity is a big, like buzzword that we would hear. Like, what's if a fan affinity? Something that they connect to, something that they want to spend their dollars on, something that people paint their face and bodies and get really into it and get married at the ballpark. Like it becomes like a part of their world. So a fan affinity is like something that was a big thing that we kind of focused on, and a lot of areas that, tailored to these different theme nights or tailored to these different groups.
Is it almost kind of like, how do you embed this brand into like somebody's everyday life? Is that what Infinity is?
It's two parts. It's like there's already a built-in, affinity. You have the grandpa that watched the games every day, so that child grew up and loved, the Tigers or the whatever team they're watching. Another part is, played baseball their entire life and all their, teammates and everything. You're going to root for your hometown team, so it's like you're going to be a fan for life. It might be you went to a game and saw, now they have like concerts. Now they have, the Comerica Park is such a beautiful park. I've been to a lot of different parks, and I think like having, a Ferris wheel, the carousel, all the different areas, activities, the affinity programs like the kids club, and like they have like a members club now. And if you go to the park as a kid, or like you're just a family trying to figure out what to do with your kids, and there's a package, we would cater packages to like, hey, family of 4 for X amount of dollars, you get tickets and free ride on the carousel Ferris wheel and money for snacks, food, or whatever.
Essentially, you're trying to package the experience for the end consumer.
You package. There's different packages that are formed out of what is already a natural thing that happens. And then, you have to stay fresh. So I feel like I've seen a lot. And even during my time there, we did like a photo walk. We got involved with photographers that, started at a point in Detroit and walked taking photos and ended at the ballpark. They may not have been Tigers fans. They may not have even been baseball fans. But it's like you kind of tap into an already existing community and show them a good time, and then they're going to have a positive experience to then be like, hey, that was fun. Let me meet up with some of my photographer friends again next time and do it on our own, or bring my family or whatever. So. And
how do those conversations happen? Like, do you guys meet in the marketing department once a week, a couple times a week, and you guys have the conversation, we need to do more of this, or we need to attract this demographic, or like, how does that conversation spark?
There's a lot of different ways that things come about. I think, even before I got there, there were already set theme nights, or already set, days, or set fan, set affinity promotions and things like that. But I think too, at different levels, like you have the fan experience, you have, bottom line, it's a business. Like, what is it? What do you need? Like, you need to fill the seats. You need to get, bodies in the seats. You need to get people there, purchasing concessions,
returning, and all
retail,
of that.
All that stuff. So it's a conversation that, one week it might just be like, all right, like it's our annual Fiesta Tigres, or it's our annual, whatever anniversary event going on that day, that year. Or it's, hey, we need to get more involved with, this community. How do we reach out and how do we engage those communities? Like, Little Leagues seems like a no-brainer, but it's like, all right, is it just baseball, little leagues? Is it, I think an event I did was with the Southeast Michigan Girl Scouts, that they used to have the Boy Scouts kind of do a walk around the ballpark, and I became a board member of the Southeast Michigan Girl Scouts locally. So that was something that I kind of brought to the ballpark, and they did a walk for the girls. Like, they didn't realize that there was, as many members as just Cub Scouts, and how different their programming was, and how their focus on, empowering young girls and things like within the business of selling cookies is something that, this was a fun activity for them to do as a group, because it's a large number. So you're either looking at like large numbers of groups, you're either looking at, opportunity. I know that this year there was, things that are different things going on in Detroit. So if it's the draft, if it's the Taylor Swift, I remember was performing, and there was a ball game or a game that day, and they're blasting Taylor Swift because she's playing at Ford Field right across. So it's like, I think they do a good job to incorporate the other teams, incorporate the city. Like, it is a staple. Like, people wear the Detroit Tigers, D on their hat.
It's funny because a lot of people think that that's like the logo of Detroit, and that's, good for the Tigers because everybody IDs it as the Detroit logo, but it's essentially only the logo of the Detroit Tigers baseball team, which is really cool that they were able to make it so powerful and so a part of the city that people from Detroit that maybe weren't necessarily baseball fans still rocked and represented the, you know, Detroit logo symbol all the time on their hats and clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it becomes a part of culture. So that's where, you know, you asked, like, do you plan these things? So it's kind of like every year is different. I'm sure the conversations that they're having now are way different than they were when I was working there.
In what way do you think?
The biggest thing I know is my dating myself of like having, you know, X amount of years in the industry already. It felt very, now we check our phone every day. Social media is kind of like a constant thing. It wasn't like that then. They might have posted, you know, once or twice a week, or it wasn't as like instant. I felt like there was more of a approval process and like graphics. I was the first in-house graphics person that was able to kind of design things on the fly. And that was during my internship. So it was, you know, a learning process, but then also learning how to work with the other departments that needed to use those creative services. I thought I was so cool with my little designer, you know, Photoshop design experience. I had about a couple of years with a previous internship that I brought that, you know, into this Tigers internship. But then I learned really quickly with our purchasing manager and then working with ticket sales, like they needed certain specs, you know, things designed to specs, you know, bleeds and trim spaces, and you needed to get X amount, you know, whatever file format and things. It's like something that I was kind of just like launched myself into.
So what percentage of what is done in-house? Because for a lot of people that don't know, at least from what I remember, back in 2013, the marketing department was very small. It was like a handful of people, maybe 5 people in-house at Comerica Park. So what percentage is of what the consumer market sees is done in-house compared to what is done maybe through an outsourced party?
Well, and that's what I say. I think the biggest thing, I can't speak to what it is now because I know it's grown, but it has grown because of that need. There was one team photographer, and at the time when I was there, now there's team photographers, there's, you know, social media photographers, there's content creators, there's, you know, more than just one photographer, different angles, different, you know, equipment, things like that. But that took years to kind of get the convincing of like, you know, whoever's making those decisions that those things were necessary to keep up with the times. Because at the, you know, when I was there, we were kind of just like, you know, hey, let's post this funny thing, you know, funny video or whatever.
There wasn't like yet a kind of format of what works in sports world on social media because it was still so new, you know, that it wasn't, I mean, almost every industry up until recently didn't really have a strategy for social media. It was just kind of like, we have this already, let's just share it on this other platform.
Yeah. No, that was the big thing. It was kind of like, oh, you slap this photo, it'll work across all platforms. Or like even now how there's, you know, you can get analytical information from all of these things, statistics. You can show growth, you can show things. And I think those are the numbers and the information that help with the business part of it. So I feel like, you know, in many industries, like when social media was first starting, it wasn't, you know, are we supposed to be funny? Are we safe? If we're a conservative company, do we share that? Do we this? Even in politics, you see it now, like, you know, the different candidates now are playing into the different social media trends or like videos, or you have presidential candidates going into podcasts that may be for a very different demographic than that you're used to seeing a political candidate on. But I think those things make it so that today's world, like everything is so transparent. So now it's like you kind of have to be, or people suspect like, what are you hiding, or what's like, you know.
And that's the reality of why a lot of brands I see don't want to share, because they know that there is that knowing now and understanding. Even with like new generations coming up, there's that question of, well, why aren't you sharing? Or why aren't you posting? What are you hiding?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a different perspective now in terms of like the approach to social media. But I'm curious about, so recently, not like within the past year, but I would assume within the past couple years that professional athletes and then also athletes, college athletes, have been given more freedom to use their likeness to bring in other streams of revenue. Because I remember at one point, well, way back in 2013, 2013, when I interned, I remember wondering to myself, like, why don't they let Miguel Cabrera hold the camera and talk about his experience during the game? Those are the kind of things that I feel like fans will connect with. And it wasn't until like many conversations with people like you or people like Ellen or other people in the department that it was such a very like controlled narrative. Like it was very like we had, and this is not just in sports. This is, I feel like, in every major Fortune 500, such a pull to try to control the image that people see without even realizing that sometimes your greatest asset in terms of content is your talent. Like they could literally pick up the phone, walk down, into the field or in the locker room, the conversations that they're having. Why do you think that now there's starting to be a little bit more leniency with that?
Because that's how the trend, that's what's popular. That's what's going to bring in more, the fan base that we were focusing on 10 plus years ago is now 10 plus years older. So you're not even marketing to the same groups anymore. You have to, Gen Z, Gen X, whatever's coming, or has come in, Gen Alpha, you're going to be talking skibbity, sigma, bobbity boop. And that's going to make total sense to them because they have their own made up language. Whereas if you were to say that 10 years ago, they would have probably been like, what is wrong? What are you saying? But even, I think about like when Snapchat started and like filters and, now with the development of AI and things like, if you're not sticking with the trends, it is very, very, very apparent, especially because social media is like everywhere now. You can't go anywhere without being, people open up that's the first thing they'll do before even getting out of bed sometimes. So it's like, as a marketer, you have to think about how people use media, how they use their devices. I work for a regional sport network. We don't talk about just one screen experience anymore. We talk about the 2-screen experience. So integrating, whatever's happening on your TV screen, if you're watching a game, are you really just, if you're at the generation that has your phone and is on your phone, you're not looking at your phone? Like you're looking at your phone. So it's like,
in
how do we?
between commercial breaks, you're
not
going
even
to your phone.
in between commercial breaks, like people are live tweeting, the Emmys, the Oscar, like Victoria's Secret fashion show just happened or whatever. Like people are texting, did you see this? Did you see that? Like same thing in games. Like a big play happens, I guarantee you within the next minute, you're going to see that replay on social media.
It's almost like the modern day chat room. Like, do you remember like in AOL, like people would log in and just like have conversations with a bunch of random people that they didn't know. And now that's Twitter. Like if there's a live event happening, people can jump on Twitter and just have conversations with the community and share their thoughts on what's happening in real time.
It's a sense of community. I think social media is a great tool for those people that may not live within a space that they can, they have or if you don't live with like other people, or if you don't live in a space where you're around your friends or family or, people that you socialize with on a day-to-day basis, it's a good way to still feel connected. Or even if you do, it's still a good way to be connected with those people. If you're at work all day, you can kind of check in and, oh, hey, quick message, whatever. But I do think the way that people now kind of hide behind a screen, in some situations, obviously it's good because, not hiding, but like being behind a screen, you're more open. You're going to, be more,
take more risks,
be brave, like to say more things or whatever. But, that's also a bad thing because
it could be a
people
weapon.
don't necessarily always think before they're posting. I remember when, Instagram started or whatever, Facebook even started, and Facebook was first just only for college students. So you only could put one picture up. It was kind of like a resume. And you could connect on like classes or things. Like it was more of a academic tool. Now it's, people are talking, about their neighbors or putting up like there's a lost dog in the neighborhood or it's like they've taken that online or that community feel in like real life and put it online.
Yeah.
And
each platform kind of shifted and kind of molded itself into, this is how we use Facebook. This is how we use Instagram. This is how we use TikTok. But I think all three kind of watch each other and study each other to see like, what is the market? How is the market using it? And how is the market using it consistently?
Yeah.
Because each platform, like you said, you guys have at FanDuel Sports now, you guys have the approach of a 2-screen experience. But I think every network is thinking about, how do we keep the audience on our platform instead of bouncing off of Instagram and going to TikTok, or bouncing off of TikTok and going to Facebook? I think it's a constant competitive battle for attention. And even in live streaming, with FanDuel Sports, you guys are streaming some of the biggest sports teams here in Detroit. And you're not just battling with a screen, you're battling, or for any fan, it's not like, now watch this on our network or watch this on our platform. It's, you got the sports team trying to get people to go to the game and have the live experience. And then you have them also, well, if you're not going to go to the game, stream it and watch it on the go.
Oh, yeah.
So
and it's a dance. It's a dance between, because no one's doing it alone. Like if you're, a live concert, like it's same for concerts, same for live events. Like people might be doing a live stream at a live event, but it's like, what's the end goal in that scenario? Is it to watch the live screen and not go to the event, or is it to get more people to go to the event? So I think it's a dance. I think, being at a network now for a little over 7 years now, I think even those years, even within those years, it's changed. A lot of people aren't watching cable anymore. They've cut cords. It's more streaming. The, Hulu, the Netflix, everything, like people cut out cable packages and, may only subscribe to one or two things. So how do you, not to say convince, but it's like, how do you then manage like the relationship that we did have or do have with, cable companies, and also not feel like you're taking away and putting something into like a direct-to-consumer product, a streaming product. And the same with the teams that we serve. Like we're doing, the service of bringing live sports to homes or in your hand, in your device. But then how do you support those teams that you work with day in, day out? Like making sure that we're promoting, if there's a special night or if there's a event happening at the ballpark, we work with them to like promote. We help, to, at the end goal to sell tickets to that show or to that event. But it's also offering an additional, for those that can't make it, maybe live in Grand Rapids or somewhere hours away, you're still bringing them the live game to continue to grow that affinity for that team.
Because I would assume for the teams, the primary goal is to get them to the ballpark, because when you got them in the ballpark, they're able to, for one, experience the event live. And then on top of that, there's other opportunities for fans to spend money on merchandise, on food, and, they take pictures, they're creating user-generated content. So there's more of a primary incentive for people to, or for the sports team to get fans to the actual ballpark. But then once the ballpark is filled, do you know what the capacity is? 50,000, or what is it at Comerica?
45.
Like 45 to 50,000. So like once you sell out all the tickets, it's like, well, we're not going to just stop promoting like this game. We're going to start saying, all right, we're full, but you can still watch at home. And then that's where partners like FanDuel Sports come in and create that streaming experience. So how is your approach, or what is the different approach from or experience for you working at the actual ballpark leading up to the game, and then now you're working with one of the major streaming platforms on getting people to watch the game that are not able to physically attend it in person. So how is the experience different for you in terms of like the marketing mindset approach from the Tigers to now FanDuel Sports?
I mean, the marketing approach as a whole is still that relationships with the team, relationship with, the sponsors, relationship with, the clients that we may have. Like it's not just one thing. And I think there's simultaneously things going on. So you may be promoting, one game happening, but even if you watch a broadcast in between breaks, they're promoting, on tomorrow's game or next week, there's this happening, or there's enough people. Of course, there's capacities that can be met, and there's not going to be every single person isn't available for every single game. So it's not just a one game or one kind of goal that's in mind. It's like a different, an array of different things that are happening all the time. One night we might be doing an activation at the ballpark or an arena or something. And it will be focusing on subscriptions for our brand. Another night it might be, supporting the 45th anniversary of, whatever World Series. So it's like we may be a sponsor of that night, but for that night we're focusing on that. So it's just, I think, like I said, it's a dance. It's back and forth. It's, we have constant meetings every week with all our teams, all our partners. It's like if there's a campaign happening, that's, for X amount of weeks we're working and promoting that. And then after that, it's another, focus. Of course, things come up if like when a play happens or something cool, obviously the playoffs just happened and the Tigers being able to go, play for the wild card. And that was just like a new energy that kind of evoked to this, not only the city, but like you can hear it in the voices of our broadcasters. You can hear it in the, or you see it in the way that these players are reacting. And then all these content creators get great shots, get great sound bites and stuff that we can use then to kind of bring that energy back into, hey, remember this moment? Want to buy season tickets for next year, or want to buy into this package and watch all the other games like on our streaming platform? Like, so there's different. It's kind of like I like the word dance. It's a dance. Like you're constantly like being observant of what's happening, staying in it. You have to like stay in tune with what the trends are. You have to remain kind and like it's back and forth like with your partners and your teams and things like that. And then it's everything else that comes after that.
So you mentioned live activations. What is that exactly?
Activations can mean you have a table or banner, like you're on the concourse engaging with fans.
So this is like when they have those pop-up tents and like live games and stuff happening. That's a live activation.
Yeah, it's a way to connect with, the fans one-on-one, or, if you're collecting emails or if you're giving away promo items.
And why is this a common practice?
I think it's a common practice because it works. It helps you really connect with, who your audience is, or maybe gain someone that may not be your audience, and you have your elevator pitch or your whatever, your few seconds to kind of get them engaged. People love free stuff. So if you're getting a free t-shirt, or especially if it's something they're already at the ballpark or they're already at the arena, that they're a fan of, whatever sport is happening. They're going to want to be like, hey, what's this hat? Or what do I do to get this, keychain, whatever.
People love free stuff.
People love free stuff.
And what better way to give away free stuff than with like branding on it? Because I think about I remember when FanDuel was called Fox Sports Detroit, and the most famous giveaways were always the bobbleheads. Like people would go crazy and line up for those. And a lot of people don't know that there's like a set number of units that are given out for each game, which I think is like between 5,000 to 10,000 units. And on those units are the sponsor of the bobblehead, and people eat it up. They look for them. People put them on eBay. Like, you know, I remember when Miguel Cabrera's last season, those bobbleheads of Miguel Cabrera were like in such high demand. Everybody was texting me asking me if I could get a bobblehead. I'm like,
we don't even work there.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so it's such a huge pool for brands to use tangible products to incentivize people. So is that something that FanDuel Sports actively practices and finds new ways of how can we get our brand into people's fans' hands and give them something that, whether it's a cup or whether it's, you know, a bag or something that they have on their person, how do you guys approach the giveaways?
Well, FanDuel Sports is like 2 days old, so I don't know. We haven't had much to practice with that, but just in the experience with Bally Sports, with Fox Sports, and even with the Tigers, I think any giveaway, aside from when you're working with the team, there's the traditional bobbleheads or figurines, jerseys, T-shirts, things like that. Again, sticking with like what the trends are. Like I remember fidget spinners were like a big thing. So our company sent us a bunch of, you know, hundreds of branded fidget spinners. And even though you know that's not going to be something that a adult that is going to buy the tickets or buy into, you know, whatever, into subscription or whatever, you know that kid that has that is going to be playing with that fidget spinner. And like to a parent, I'm sure like anything
they could just
that
give
gets
it to their kid,
yeah, anything that gets their kid to behave or, you know, relax for a second, whatever, they're going to be like, all right, great. And it just ticks off like a positive experience. So it's creating those positive experiences. So you're like, you know, if it's something they put on their desk, if it's something that now, again, staying with the trends, we would put, you know, QR codes on things, or like, hey, scan this for, you know, percentage off of your next ticket or your next subscription, whatever the deal is. And not only with that are people intrigued to kind of like scan those, you're also getting data, you're getting information, you're able to still, you know, remain engaged with those people that do those things. You have their email address. So a lot of the like affinity, like fan groups and things like that are formed start from those things. Like, oh, hey, this group really likes hats, or this group really likes, you know, came to a lot of kid events, or came to a lot of, you know, maybe memorabilia type events or something. So then you have like, you can either geo-target, you can specify which group you're reaching out to. Because if we have a kids event coming up, it's like you're gonna not waste your time, but it's like your efforts are geared towards people that you already know have this, like have kids or have, you know, grandchildren that they want to bring to a game, or have brought them to a game before.
So speaking of giveaways, I remember one year they gave away like a mock-up of the Fiesta Tigres jersey, as all the guests, I think it was like the first 5,000 or 10,000 guests that arrived got a mock-up of that. And a lot of people don't know that you're actually the person that designed that jersey for the Fiesta Tigres celebration. How did that conversation start? Like, did you spark that conversation, or did somebody say, hey, we need to have like a jersey that says Tigers in Spanish for this Latin celebrated event? How did that conversation come about?
I didn't do it alone. I think it was my eagerness to see it. So I started in 2011 as an intern, kind of asked, and I saw a few other teams had it at their celebration. So they had their team name translated for special events like that. And I asked, you know, why don't we do it? But again, it was a time where maybe the team was a little more conservative. Maybe they didn't go outside of the box too much. Maybe they didn't, you know, have anyone that could design it. Like there was, I think, a few different elements. So kind of let it go. The first year I was an intern, I was like, I'm not going to bring this up. Second year, I was like, hey, you know, bringing this up again, like, what do we do? And it's like, oh, it's a whole process. You have to go through MLB. You have to go through, you know, the designer, the jersey designer at the time was Majestic. So I was like, all right, how do we do that? You know, like, and at the time, I think even the people that I was working with, including our director, promotions director, Eli Bayless, and of course the VP of marketing, Ellen, we were kind of figuring out the process as well. So, and Eli had worked on a number of like on-field activities and jersey, you know, like the Jackie Robinson Day and the Negro Leagues weekend and stuff like that. They were special jerseys, but what people don't know is you have to have those things kind of pre-approved before, well, at least at the time, that's how it was. It was you had to have things pre-approved so that there was enough time to get things special made. All these guys wear different sizes and have their jerseys already kind of set for them for the season. So
because MLB owns the Detroit Tigers, right? Or no, not. Let me rephrase that. MLB owns. Or explain that because like I think there's some confusion in how it's formatted, because if things have to get approved, but I mean, for most people in Detroit know that the Ilitch family owns the Detroit Tigers team, but explain that and kind of break that down a little bit. Why would you need to get something approved for something that you own?
It's a franchise, like any franchise, you know, like you can't take a McDonald's or something and do all this. Like there's, you know, the league would be the
it's almost like if you own a McDonald's
and they set regulation, they set, you know, obviously they're setting the rules for the game that's being played. Like there's a players association that's protecting a lot of the rights of the players. Like there's so many things. I don't think one sole person owns like full control over everything. But going through MLB, they are able to regulate like what the jerseys look like, what, you know, because if you can't have someone, you know, there was cases of people putting like grease on their hand or something, you know, like to, I don't know, whatever
unfair
they wanted,
advantage.
Unfair advantage or disadvantage or whatever. So that's why a lot of those rules are put in place and just to keep things regulated.
Yeah.
So we worked with MLB and it wasn't like, oh, we're getting, you know, like we can't do or anything. It's just we had to present it in a way that it was like, okay, we followed all your regulation. This is going to fit within standard. There's nothing crazy colors. We're not using like, you know, colors that are outside of the style guide and all these things. So it's like going through that process. So like I said, the first year I was kind of like, okay, I'm new. Like I'm an intern, not going to bother with it. Second year, kind of asked more questions. And by that point, I was hired full time. So I got to go to MLB marketing meetings and like meet with the other teams that did do this. And they kind of gave me a little bit of insight in how to do it and having to go through the process and stuff. And at that time it was, I think before the season started or even like, you know, months before the season started so that they can get that in the new style guide or get that in the new, just like all the plans for like Majestic having to create those jerseys, having to get them all fit to size, put all the names, you know, the names,
the whole
like
process.
Everything, the whole process.
I'm curious, like, about your take on why do you think more, like, if people are watching a game, they see the players. That's a lot of real estate. Like you can like, why is it that it's not a common practice in major league sport, like Major League Baseball? Because I've seen it in like minors or other, you know, professional sport leagues that some of these players, or like the UFC, like a lot of the player or the fighters are sponsored by like Monster or something, and they have the brand on their attire. Why do you think, or why would you say that in professional baseball specifically, even in maybe hockey or any other sports, professional sports in Detroit, why is it not a common thing for that real estate to be utilized in a way to produce more revenue, not just for the team or the network or whoever is the main benefactor or beneficiary of the revenue coming in, but even for the players, it's their body, you know, like, why should they not be able to put like a patch of a organization that they support or something like that?
It's becoming more common practice, and it does take time because obviously going through regulations and fair practice, you know, getting the right, like your team, you have to look unified. There's a uniform, like comes down to like you have to look the same. Like you can't go out there, like they can change it up with their, shoes or, sometimes. But there's a lot of things that even I don't know the details all to that, their agents write up in their contract that they have to have in the Players Association mandates, like they can't have, X amount of this happen or, whatever regulation is happening at the time. So it's like, and that's kind of the battle between like the marketers and then the people that are holding those regulations. It's like, hey, but this will be so cool. This will be so great. But it's like, yeah, then you're going to get into, oh, a player, was distracted by your neon green headband and now I lost the game because of it, or whatever. So it's like a lot of areas need to be covered within, like with any change, even if it's a small jersey patch, which I know that's been happening now more often, which was never thought about back then. Going back to even designing the Tigres jersey, I knew, and I worked within the parameters because I'd asked before and I was like, oh, this is easy. It should be just quick, put whatever font on there and go to print, go to production. But I dug through the archives, which at the time was literally like pull out a drawer, go through the photos, like from, every year. And I was like, there had to be a year. And I had some friends that were big my baseball nerds, like I would lean into. Our director of marketing at the time, Ron Wade, he was like, go check the archives. There might be photos. I know in this year they wore a different jersey because that was the thing that I knew I had to work with. I needed to work within a parameters of like a conservative team, a team that wanted to uphold its, utmost, like the Old English D is like strong. It's a strong thing. So why do I need to convince somebody to change that? So that was kind of what was happening. And in 1960 they wore tigers for 1 year only. And I modeled it after that. It was very clean, very simple.
Do you know why it was only 1 year?
I think it's because it was so strong. The Old English D is so strong. And up until, gosh, I don't even remember when it happened, but I don't know if people know this either. There was a distinction between the Jersey D and the hat D. They were two different logos. I can't remember which year, but it was within the last 5-10 years that they unified it and made it, one logo. So now it's one logo. And they went with the hat D, which is the most recognizable one. The Jersey D was a little more curved. And I worked on creating our style guide too. I was in the committee or the team that put the style guide together, kind of like reworked it because we have had when I was with the Tigers, so many logos that had gone through, and you want to include all the logos from your like different affinity programs, your theme nights and things like that weren't trademarked or anything. So you want to include those in your style guide. And of course now it's kind of like standard practice, but
I'm curious,
creating that.
Do players have any say in this? Because if they're the ones on the field playing and they're the ones that could potentially be distracted, do they have any say in like what they wear?
I think that is a say. Like, it's like these things have been over years, like put into practice and like, okay, like and I'm sure like things have changed and maybe just haven't been altered. Like maybe someone's brought up, but I'm sure through the Players Association, they may bring up their concerns or their ask or anything. I don't know what that is. I haven't been a part of the Players Association.
I would be curious about that conversation because like just thinking about in terms of sponsorships, because sponsorships are such a big part of revenue for major league sports teams. I mean, you go to a ballpark and you have signs all over, you have giveaways, you have on cups, you have like, there's so much involved in terms of sponsorship. But like just thinking like, say if there were a new SpongeBob movie to come out and then all the players wear like a SpongeBob themed Detroit, like almost like collab, you know, like when Supreme and Louis Vuitton did a collab and it was such a big deal. There was so much media publicity behind it. Like, I think doing kind of unexpected moves like that, where all the players show up with like a SpongeBob like design with the Detroit logo and then branded as like SpongeBob X the Detroit Tigers, would lead to a lot of buzz and talk. But I can imagine that for the traditional mind or approach, or the people that are responsible for approving these uniforms, may have a different feeling about that.
Mm-hmm. And it's integrity, keeping what your brand is, and especially for teams that have been around for hundreds of, 100 years plus, like, it's like, how do you keep that integrity? And if you do it for one, you're going to, like, where do you stop? Like, where does, they might be able to do a one-off, like I said, like a campaign or a one-time thing, but it's like, you want to maintain the integrity of what your brand is, what your color, what people recognize you as, what, and you're not just, it's not as, I feel like with fashion, when fashion collabs happen, there's more of a, okay, we know the audience for this, for, you said Louis Vuitton or Supreme, whatever, when we know the audience for this. They may not be 100% the same, but they're still in like the fashion like world. When you start incorporating like a fashion world and a sport world and things like that, like, it's like, you have to remember that you're catering to, especially with a team that has fans from age 2 to
But that's what I
102.
mean. That's what I mean. I think if you can, when you say cater, I think when you go to Comerica Park, you have a section that is kind of like known as the kids court with like this Ferris wheel and stuff like that. You have so many different demos of fans, and kind of touching on your point on the brand. I think today, with such a common focus on attention, like, how do we capture attention? How do we bring in new crowds? How do we maintain attention? I think the whole approach of like brand guidelines is kind of I think it's still so important, but I think it's starting to become a little bit more blurred and lenient. I don't think that a lot of people that put out content don't really feel as of a need to use all of the same color tones or palettes or typesets, as, they're allowing themselves to add some more versatility in there and kind of see like, well, what speaks to this audience, or what, gets attention with this piece of creative, I think it's almost like fans expect something new, expect something different, expect something that they haven't seen before. And I think when you're when it's an organization that is very traditional, I respect that, because they built that level of brand. They built that level of weight and credibility. They built that, oh my gosh, I work for this brand. So it's not to dismiss it. I don't think that it should ever be dismissed. But I think that allowing an organization or a brand to at least try some versatility in there and see like, what's the response? What are people saying? What data do we get from this?
And and it's happening. It's just not happening at again, going back to brands that are, hundreds of years old, that were maybe more on the conservative end, or maybe had a more traditional way of marketing, versus a brand that was established as, like, there's a team, Savannah Bananas. They're founder, like, they basically were like, let's do the most wild things. Let's have all these players.
Is that the one where they like dance?
They're dancing.
But that's what I'm saying. It's so cool.
It is, but it's like, that was founded on that kind of ideal. That was founded on that. So it's like, I feel like the brands that weren't necessarily founded on, like, they were founded on something different, it wasn't even in existence when they were founded, they're slowly coming into it. Like Tigers last summer, they had a partnership with Sana Detroit. It was a clothing brand. So I thought that was cool. And like, as someone that was there at a time where that was like, we never would have even thought of that, I was like, awesome. Like, it's good to see. And that's why I think I like marketing so much, because it's like, it may not be whatever you think at this time, but then over time it may develop into something else. Or, you may get to a point where you can try, I feel like with social media, you can try so many more things, and it's not so permanent as something that like, hey, we're going to get a billboard that has to stay up, only got one shot at this, versus like, let's try something. It's going to be gone. People are going to forget about it in a couple of days. So I think it's, it's all about like the resources and what people have access to. And then like, at the end of the day, it's like, whatever team is in place to do the marketing for a team or any business, they're going to be the ones to decide and be able to tap into the trends and what's happening in that moment.
And you know what's interesting is I almost look at social media as like testing ground. Like if you're a major network or streaming platform that like you can't have a show on Hulu or Netflix filmed on a young person's camera with the audio and expect for people to watch that. I mean, some people might, but there's a level of subconscious expectation from the consumer that I want the audio to sound good. I want the picture to look good. If it's too dark, it's going to kind of distract me. It's going to feel like the show Ozark on Netflix. I never understood. I'm like, is my settings too dark? I'm like, I couldn't understand it. But these things that for a lot of us, don't know why or how, but it's just subconscious planted seeds in our mind. And I think it's just over time as we go to movies, as we watch shows, we start to know what we expect for something or from a brand. So I don't know. I just find that with social media, it's like almost your opportunity to test and see, because if it hits organically, if you put a piece of content out. The other day I saw a video on Instagram of two players that were, I don't know if they were, if it was it was around the time where the doors had just opened, and you know how like fans start coming down and they want to get autographs and stuff. And they had mic'd two players, and they heard this little kid like said to one of the players, I forget his name, but he was like, shouted his name. He was like, "Hey, can you sign my bat? Make my sister jealous." And like the little boy shouted that. You can't see him, but you saw the players laugh, and they're like, "Oh my God, go sign his bat." So it was that moment of just like realness, that moment of like, wow, that was just a cool moment captured. And in real time, you were able to get the players not just physical response, but audio response. And then obviously, of course, they cut to like him signing the bat and then stuff like that. So it's like little pieces of like that where you're like, oh, these players are people. They're dads, they're brothers, they're, cousins and all this. Like they're people. Like, so when you're able to connect to people, it's easier for you to want to support those people.
Yeah.
No,
and I agree. I think that people don't realize that, if we mic'd you up all day long, would you want everyone to hear and see what you do? It's what's the limit? Like, is it like, I remember before players were even mic'd up, we'd get phone calls of like little old ladies watching TV, like, why didn't Justin Verlander swear? And we're like, "Ma'am, sorry, where did you hear that?" He's like, "I saw it on TV." And you're like, "What?" Like, you didn't even hear it. But it's like, they're human, right? But like a lot of things can be taken out of context. A lot of things can be, they don't want all their, but like to some degree, to a big amount of them, they want their own privacy. They want things protected for themselves. That's why they do have these protections in place with their agents, with their, a lot of like trying all these new, trends, like social TikTok trends or photos or, for us, it's like, oh, great, content access, things like that. But it's like, if you put yourself in their shoes, you have to think of like, how much can I give of myself?
Yeah,
and every day I'm not going to bring my
But it's an interesting, but that's such a good point, because it's such an interesting concept, because it's like, you know what? Like I've thought about this actually, putting a camera in the studio and just filming for 24 hours, having myself mic'd up and just letting people kind of see like, this is what it's like behind the curtain, because, there's some people that are doing this right now. I don't know if you've followed Gary Vaynerchuk, but Gary Vaynerchuk, he live streams from all networks, TikTok, Facebook, Twitch, and he has like just and then he goes, "Sorry guys, I can't have the audio for this." So he'll mute it and then like have his meeting and stuff and then go back and boom. But it's like you're almost stripping away that third wall and just saying like, welcome in. Like there is no filter. There is no like curated script, And I think that's, in my opinion, why I feel like live streaming is so like doing so well on social networks right now because it's like unedited real time experience. Because like how you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people that don't have a significant other or don't have family and they're living at home and feeling like you can connect to someone almost like that third wall, like where you're like like it's interesting. You know, I feel like a lot of people like to watch people have conversations. That's why podcasts are so popular, because it's like, it just feels like you're in the room, like part of the conversation. So I would be interested to see, like, in the next few years, if more sports teams start to kind of open up that, you know, opportunity, because I do agree with what you said. Like, it has to be kind of like permission. Like, I don't think it's kind of like the whole, you don't just walk into someone's house without ringing the door or ringing the doorbell. But if players give you permission to mic them, and then, but they're also kind of the same way they do media training, given some sort of guidance, like, hey, remember, you're mic'd up. Don't say things that could potentially get you fined or, you know, offend somebody. But then at the same token, it's almost like, I really want to, like, if I'm supporting someone, it's almost like, I feel like equivalent to why people don't talk about politics. You know, if like you own a business and you don't want to lose half of your customer base because you support one or the other candidate, it's like, well, do you really want to focus so much on curating this image for people that you maybe don't see eye to eye? At the end of the day, we're all people. We're all the same. We're all humans. But it doesn't mean that we have to all agree on everything. You know what I mean?
In an ideal world, yeah, of course. But the internet can be really cruel. And I think that giving, you know, miking up a player, miking up, you know, someone, even you think of like celebrities, like they are acting a role. They are participating in a role. They have to, you know, put on a face for whatever, you know, their contract says for X amount of times, for X amount of dollars, whatever. Same for players, athletes. They have to perform at a level of like skill on the court. And if someone like, I don't know, if someone grew up their entire life and they got so good at, you know, what sport they play, but they have they have something that they do to prepare that may not be, like they're listening to some kind of music that may not be catered, you know, everyone might not like. That's tapping into, you know, well, why are they listening to that? Why are they like, that's their ritual. That's their, you know, that's how they prepare for a game to get you the outcome that they signed up for.
Yeah, but I also feel like you should have the choice of being able to say what you want to share and what you don't. Because I think that goes into the conversation of mental health, you know, where people feel a lot of pressure, not just in professional sports, but in the work environment, to uphold this image, to uphold this, like, I have to be perfect, I have to be polished, I have to, you know, I was having a conversation with somebody that's in the beauty industry, and, you know, there was a point made where it's like, there's just this such heavy focus on image and upholding this image. And I'm like, and let me be fair, you know, I think for women, it is a lot more unfair, because for men, and I'm not going to say all men, I would say for men, like just in general, there is not such a focused emphasis on image. Because I think that for men, it's more so about, it just is what it is, you know, like, and again, like I said, it's not every man. It's just men like to go to the gym. They like to shower and then throw on some clothes and then go out the door. But for women, it's like, there's hairstyle, there's nails, there's makeup, there's, you know, how clothes fits on them. It's like, it's so much more like demanding. And I feel like a mental warfare that's going on. And because like the other day I was listening to an artist, Charlie XCX. She was talking about, she's on tour right now, and she was talking about how, like, even at 32, she has this constant like back and forth conversation in her head about like the shape of her face, how certain clothes fits on her, like how her hair, like I'm like, wow, somebody that is so like seen as this icon by a lot of fans has those, and to be fair, I don't know, like she's on tour with Troye Sivan, another singer who's a male. He may be having the same things going on in his head because there's so much focus on people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost kind of like, it would be such a beautiful, and you're right, a perfect world if we just didn't like give so much power to that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we all have so many gifts and talents, and it's just like, let's appreciate those and let's appreciate the things that make us different. Like if you don't agree with what somebody's, ritual is, like it's okay. You can either decide to support them, buy their jersey, or buy someone else's jersey,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no, and I think there's no clear formula right now. I think that we're kind of teetering off or catering off of a formula, so to speak, of what advertising and marketing and image and everything was hundreds of years ago. Like you have just until the last decade or so that women with curve was okay to have that. Because why? Before, every magazine, every blemish was removed, every imperfection, every pore, everything. So it's like you have generations of people that grew up on that, and it's not that easy to turn off. It's not that easy to just walk outside and be like, I don't care anymore, because it's like all the people you work with, like whatever your job is, you have to look a certain way. You may have a uniform. You may have, you can't wear colored, different color hairstyle. You have to wear a certain, cover your tattoos. Like in a lot of places, it's still very much like that. I will say in a lot of places, it's starting to change. It's, the idea of like business casual or business wear in the workplaces differs from, industry to industry and company to company. But, it's not uncommon now to walk into a sports team and see people rocking sneakers and like the newest J's or whatever. Like, and that's something that
really in the office.
Yeah, they're catering to I don't want to say catering, but they're playing into the trend. They're letting
Casual
that be
lifestyle.
Okay. They're letting that be okay, because if it's okay for their players and their the product on the team, in the arena or whatever to be that, then why shouldn't it be okay in the business?
And what is your feeling about that?
I like it. I think it's a good transition into what it's authenticity. I think if I can go back and tell myself, like, starting in this world, it's like, yes, I always wanted to kind of fit into whatever the position was. And again, when I first started, I didn't even know what it meant to work in sports. So if I could go back and tell myself, like, no matter what you do or no matter what you're trying to, learn and be like, still be authentic to like yourself. And as much as I've tried to do that, I think looking back, there were moments where I would really try to like fit into a mold so that I was either hiding myself or like hiding my like the diversity and like mainly not to get attention, mainly to like to just get the attention on my work, not myself. And as a woman in sports, like that's something you have to deal with. Like people may be hating on the fact that you have, a certain look or a certain clothes fit you a certain way. So it's something that you're conscious about. And for me, it was like, I always wanted my work to shine through. I always wanted my, what I was doing and not like what I was wearing and not what I was, showing off or whatever.
And I can only imagine as a Latina, a woman in sports with hecklers and like male-dominated industry, what was that experience like from your perspective as a Latina in sports? Like, were there ever any times where you felt super uncomfortable or just like that was really inappropriate or just didn't know how to handle a situation because you were just kind of like caught off guard? I'm curious about your experience on that.
Well, I think I had good mentors. I think like my boss was a woman. I had other female like mentors that had been working in sports for a while, and my best friend in like workspace was also a Latina woman. So, and she worked directly in the public relations department. So she was working in the clubhouse with the players. And so we would bond a lot over these kind of like, okay, make sure we're, covering up, make sure we're wearing certain things, protected each other in certain areas. Like if we were at an event together, we'd stick together. Or like,
why did you feel that was important? You just didn't want to attract undesired attention, or like you didn't want for that kind of to open up? I think it
was more so the perception of what other people in, like other departments or something might have think. Like you never wanted to be thought of as like someone engaging with a player or engage. I mean, there's rules about that stuff. There's rules about like engaging with, your people you work with and in your workspace, and they are part of the company. So it's like, you're not supposed to engage with the players. You're not supposed, like in that kind of way. Like it's like, and again, it was even more so a divide because we weren't given the access that a lot of people are given access to now, like photographers, content creators, things like that. Back then it was like, why do you want to be in the clubhouse? Or why do you want to be on the field? Or why do you want to, like, are you trying to get with, players? Are you trying to get this? And it's a lot of times it wasn't said out loud that way, but it's just like you could kind of start to feel the tones and like hear say of what other people were, if someone else was talked about, you're like, I don't want to be that person that's being talked about. So I did my best to like kind of just steer away from that. Again, like my mentors at the time, they taught me to, hold myself in a certain way, at a certain level, so that the focus was on my job, not on me trying to get with a player or engage in that kind of way. I wasn't there for that. I'm not to say that other people may not be there that are there for that.
Yeah, you never know where you're going to meet your soulmate, but at the same time, you don't want to be undermined for the value that you're bringing to your role.
Yeah. Like I don't want someone to think like, oh, you just got that position because, or you just got to work with that athlete because, you look a certain way or something. Like it's like, no, I am good at my job. I am professional and I'm going to get the job done regardless of what I look like. So,
and that's almost why I feel like this major push recently for like just complete stripping of any filters, because it's like when you know how great someone is at what they do, you can't deny it. Like it doesn't matter what the physical outer appearance is. When you like, for example, if somebody is an incredible dancer or an incredible designer or incredible athlete or an incredible chef, anything, the proof is in the pudding. Like you cannot take away the credibility of the actual like gift when it's like realized, like you've experienced it.
Yeah.
So you can't just be like, oh, well, she's just a good chef because she's pretty. Like that just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
So it's almost like now and I feel like especially with people being able to share their own voice and experience, and I'm curious to ask you about this next. Like there's no curtain for people because you're able to share your story with the world. Like if somebody goes online and finds anybody with an organization, like the head of the marketing for Nike or the marketing for the Pistons, like it's easy to find these people online through their website or whatever. And then people can go to their LinkedIn or Instagram and find them and see like what they're doing and what they're talking about. Is there a conversation like that going on about what you can or cannot share online as a professional in sports?
Yeah, I that kind of conversation, when I did start, I was an intern. So I think a lot more of those conversations happened then. And I was able to build a reputation off of that. If I would have come in my first year as an intern or even my first year entry level and started to do those things that were not so well respected or not so like looked at, then I would not have been chosen for that promotion or the next job or the next, company that I worked at. I think that all of that follows you. So there's not as much conversation now, but I think now that I've been in the industry 10 plus years, I'm kind of looking retrospectively at like, what is my brand? What is my image now? It's not me trying to have to prove something, but like just showing, how has it changed? Has it, become something else? Like, am I sharing now at a level of like someone who's had this experience and has the wisdom of, X amount of years under my belt? And what does that look like? Because someone who had that experience, that I have now 10 plus years ago, didn't have all the LinkedIn, didn't have all the, social media ways coming on podcasts, doing things to like propel their brand and their image to keep them engaged, keep them in the game. Like you got to keep the same way athletes have to like, they get older, they get, the new thing comes in. You got to keep your brand, like what's going to keep your audience engaged. And as you get older or throughout the years, your audience is going to change. So how do you keep that new audience engaged? Or how do you introduce yourself into a new audience?
Like reinvent yourself.
Yeah, reinventing yourself. Or maybe you want to tap into a younger audience. So how, like, what angle are you choosing to do that? Like, is it, I never really kind of looked at myself as a brand or not as myself as like the product. I've always worked in a marketing capacity where I was the opposite. Like I was working to promote or, the production of a product.
So that's what I mean. I think it's like when you're somebody as a professional in sports, it doesn't mean that you're not your own brand. And I think that as you start to develop your own kind of likeness and awareness as somebody that is affiliated with this organization, they don't own you. You're just attached to them for this period of time and you're representing them you're representing them. Doesn't mean that you can't, like if you're a sports fan and you work for the Detroit Lions, like if you're a big sports, like big major football fan, and you are maybe the marketing coordinator or director of the Detroit Lions, like, is it allowed for you to go onto your social media, TikTok, and give your own narrative of what the game, like feedback of the game, and kind of give your kind of perspective on what that experience was like through your eyes? Or is it almost kind of like, hey, no, don't do that. Let the professionals do this, There's
a little bit of both. I am starting to see, not just in the sports world, but in other brands and other companies, they're starting to let, if they have talent, or they maybe even hire people that have a following or the ability to be good on
like
camera.
Influencers.
Yeah, influencers. I think I see that changing, but it's like you also, depending on whatever company it is, or depending on how much access the information that company like if it's a law firm or it's a medical, company, there's obviously laws that are protecting like the information that's given out. Like you can't give personal clients or customer information out like that, or even just like the behind the scenes, like legally what's happening may not be smart to expose that
like
on social
everything
media.
can't be divulged.
Yeah. So I think there's, a lot of companies and brands are starting to use the influence. They see the benefit of it. A lot of them have done it and are doing it successfully, and maybe some have like started to do it, maybe hired someone new because they're like, this wasn't working, and adjusting as they go. But it's one of those things, it's like a trend, right? Like it wasn't popular, 10, 15 years ago to be in the White House recording, and now you have influencers going in doing TikToks and helping with, especially now with the vote coming up. Like it's like it's like that company, it's a business as well. Like they know that that's going to help get their message out. They're going to get that audience.
And then you mentioned off camera too that there's like at the Detroit Tigers, there's somebody that is specific role to capture images and photos on the field, but at the same time, they're given leeway to kind of create their own content. And you had mentioned that there's fans that come up to them and say, hey, I watch your content. And like, they're almost more famous than the players themselves,
Mm-hmm.
what's the conversation like on that?
I don't know what that conversation's like. I know they're like, just obviously having worked with the team and knowing what we were and were not able to do, or at least what the style or the structure was then, and seeing things change, which of course they're going to change over time and with trends and things happening. It's something that like I discuss with my former coworkers, like, wow, can you believe like when we were, back in the day, imagine if we had social media, what the things we could post or what we could say or what, whatever. So it's not so much of like, oh, what are they doing? Like that's like I'm happy that it's happening. I think that it's a good thing. I know that I don't know what the process was for that person in particular, but I think that using someone that I don't even want to say like to try it, but it's like if that person were to do something that was not approved or not, didn't fall in line with whatever the guidelines were, then they would never do it again. Like it's just like, it's also very like you're almost like walking on eggshells, because it's like, okay, we're going to try this, we're going to do this, but if it doesn't work out, then it's going to be hard for someone else, to bring someone else in. And,
do you feel like there's almost a level of fear of trying because of what the repercussions could be? Like, is it that almost controlled in professional sports? Like the image of like, if you do something and it is like you get slapped on the hand, you're not just getting slapped on the hand, you're almost getting cut from that role? Or is it almost like you feel a little bit more leniency to try things? Or like, how is that? Like from somebody that is in professional sports, like how do you approach that willingness to try things that come from your mind, but then also like, I have to stick to this?
Mm-hmm.
To what degree?
It differs. I think every company has, a different set of guidelines. Every, especially now with our rebrand, we're learning what these new guidelines are. We're learning what our limits are. We're learning what is going to be, what does this now rebranded company want to be known as? Do they want to be known as like just sports, just the broadcast, just, or do they want to incorporate like lifestyle? Do they want to incorporate, more local marketing tactics and things like that, engaging with fans, getting real life stories. So I think it's for someone who works in like, you may be going into it, if you're someone who's looking to work in sports or looking to work whatever industry you're looking to work in, I think it's important to now, and I think it's more common now that people look at the, like the mission statements, what the work culture is like. Is it a space that I'm going to feel okay wearing, like more casual clothes? If I'm a person that likes to dress up funky style and wear things, am I going to fit in with a workplace that's very conservative and suit and tie and buttoned up? But I think that opens up the option now to more people, especially working remote jobs, especially with like, those kind of digital world jobs where it's like you have more of a leniency with what you're like. If a brand or a company wants you to express yourself, that's going to be like front page of your, acceptance letter. Like or like you getting to that point where you're understanding, like, I think the questions that are being asked in interview questions and when you're before you even get hired, like, especially for me, it's like, what's the work culture like? What's the importance on work-life balance? How do you support your employees in mental health? What's the like requirement for me to be in an office? Like all these things are going to factor into the decision of like someone wanting to work in a workspace.
And would that be your advice to somebody that's looking to, maybe they just graduated college or maybe they're looking to change industries? Like, would you say start there, go to the website, look at the mission statement, look to kind of figure out what the culture is like? Is there a clear roadmap of how to do that?
I wouldn't say a clear roadmap, but there's definitely more access than before. Every company now has a social media page. Every company now, like you said, has a website. You can connect with someone on LinkedIn. Hey, like it's very common now. Like I'm a student. I get so many messages. I'm a student in sports and just want to pick your brain or want to get your, what's it like working in for a broadcast network? What's it like working for a team? And
are there any opportunities for people that are interested in like getting more like one-on-one engagement with you to like pick your brain or ask you questions. Like, do you guys ever host like Q&As or like table talks, or like what are those opportunities like?
Yeah, there's different. I mean, there's WISE, which is a Women in Sports and Entertainment. There's organizations that now like you can find, network with other women, or if I'm a student, network with the women in these kind of organizations, or I'm like blanking on the other ones, but there are different groups now that like I've been formed, reaching out on LinkedIn. Like if it's not a one-on-one conversation, email is always more accessible. And I think like if in any industry or any company, like you're always going to want to help the next person that's going to be in that role, or if you're HR, you want people to want to apply and want to work for you, or work in that company. So I think I'm always, up for answering on LinkedIn or trying to find time. And in the past we've had, like, I know the Tigers do have like a Women in Sports Day, or like just sports, like career days, things like that, where I've spoken at, or other people have spoken at in their, respective departments, and things that you've learned about, like whether it's students, kids in, middle school, high school level, or even at the college level. There's definitely a lot of programs like that.
I'm also curious too, because locally there is a lot of organizations, and I think too with like this new kind of talk of like the surge of the new Detroit, and there's a lot of debate about that, like newness as well. There's a lot of organizations that are either coming to Detroit or starting in Detroit that are looking to support people that are wanting to either start their own business or strengthen their network. Like, where do you go for strengthening kind of your network, and also kind of rubbing elbows and gleaning from mentors, or like what is that experience like for you?
Well, I'm lucky to be a type of person that like, I'm just curious by nature. Like talking to anyone, I can be like, oh, hey, let's meet up and talk further on that. Or like, oh, I know somebody that I can connect you with, or vice versa. They'll be like, oh, you should talk to this person. So I'm lucky in the sense that I'm curious enough to like kind of find those things out on my own. And then another part, being from Detroit and still working in, such a, like, Detroit has never been gone. It's always had a rumbling going on. I think the new Detroit is a new shiny thing that we are focusing on, but the people, I feel like, is what make it such a great, diverse city, such a authentic city, such a city that like is okay with it, falling on your butt and getting back up, like picking yourself up, and a community that picks you back up. Like, so being a part of that community, and all of my close friends, or people that I've either gone to school with or grew up in the neighborhood with, like, and have remained local or even not local. Like, I still connect with and stay in touch with a lot of my peers in high school and middle school and stuff. So, and all of those people are now in positions that we kind of share stories, share support. I have a friend that, works for an ad agency, and we kind of collaborated on a few things before, whether it be like a promo that we worked on, or just bouncing ideas off of each other. And the same for, that they can connect me to their network. So I think it's like super important to get connected and stay curious, stay hungry, stay out there. And if that's, something that there's always going to be something that you can get into. And it may not be in the industry that you think. Yeah. It may be, I know you do a lot of work with art galleries and artists and stuff like that. And that being such a, in pop culture, something that's pretty prominent.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to give yourself the freedom to explore other industries and avenues, because I think for a lot of people that may not feel so comfortable reaching out and saying like, hey, I'm a senior or I'm a junior at Wayne State University, I wanted to pick your brain. They may not have that level of confidence that maybe like you have, which is why I always find such a importance for people to just do what feels natural for you. Like, if you feel good about reaching out, reach out. You may not get like, And I got to practice this myself, because I think that it's like sometimes we take it personal if we don't get an instant response back, but the truth of the matter is that you got a lot going on. You got like, every professional has a million things on their plate. So it's like, if they don't get back to you right away, it doesn't mean that they're not going to get back to you. Just means that it's not right now. But I think that if it's, for you just mentioned the art space, like the art space was something for me that was so unfamiliar and so I've never tapped into, but it opened up my mind to a whole nother world, And I think when somebody allows themselves to say like, I want to be in sports, but it doesn't mean I'm just going to go to sports events or sports this or I'm going to allow myself to go to all these different types of things to practice, to practice what it's like to have conversations with people that I don't know, because then maybe I'll build up the confidence to reach out to Angela Perez on email and introduce myself and say, hey, I would like to have a conversation with you.
Yeah. No, I hope that me doing things like this, and I'm not the most comfortable. Like I said, I'm just barely even starting to build up I feel like I'm confident in other areas, but when it comes to the focus on myself, like I put all the emphasis on my work, on my connections, on my, like I do graphic design as well. Like what does everything look like? I feel like it fits in a perfectly catered, or curated piece that I produce. And people can say, look at that, as opposed to like being my real authentic self. It's scary. It's scary to like be exposed and get out there. But I think if anything, I hope things like this will start to, help me be a little more confident in being able to talk about like the things that I do and like my brand. But also for others to see, hey, like maybe connect with something and want to connect with, or have a question. Like I'm totally open for that. I hope that more of that comes from this kind of thing.
So I could imagine that as somebody that is so talented and gifted with multiple talents, sports is not your one and all. Like you have so many tools in your tool shed. What are some things that you're excited about that are coming up? What are some things that because you just mentioned that like you're starting to put yourself out there more in terms of like your own personal brand and stuff like that. What are some things that you're looking forward to?
I think that I'm looking forward to, a couple things. Like obviously with the new rebrand of the company that I currently work for, I'm excited to see where that goes. I think I'm excited to take a little more priority in my personal life as well, like seeing where growth in family and growth in like relationships that I have, my personal relationships, travel, trying to get as much, in, and then also exploring, sharing all the wisdom, all the things that I have experience in. I've reached a level where I'm like, okay, I can do a lot of these things, to help my community. I can do a lot of things to like, work with organizations that I connect with, and how can I share my skill and my talent with those that may not have the resources or may have questions, and what does that look like? Is it starting my own, creative agency? Is it working with becoming a board member of some organization that speaks to me? I do love Detroit. I'm a Detroiter through and through. And I think that the community that helped raise me is strong. And I think that I want that for future generations. I want that for, my friends' kids, my family, family members, nieces and nephews, things like that. So it's like, I want to be a part of that, maintaining a world where people feel that they can express themselves, be creative, try new things, and not be kind of stuck behind fear or something like that. So I don't know. I like trying new things. So maybe there's something I haven't even thought about that I'll try. I want to learn sign language. I want to travel more, and maybe within those travels, learn a new aspect of what I do, like how to market in an international company or in an international business, how to market, somewhere where I don't speak the language, how to I went to Japan for our honeymoon, and the way that they do sponsorship and marketing is so different than here. So would definitely be interested in kind of learning a little bit about that.
That would be really cool. And I think for some people watching, they may not know that you're my sister.
Lucky you.
What would you say has been a memory of me that has stuck with you?
That's a good question.
You can take some time to think about it.
Okay. So many good memories. No, I think that a memory or a collection of
And let me
memory.
explain why I asked you this question, because I don't want people watching thinking like, that's so naive of me to ask a lot of questions. I think it's important for people to get other people's perspective on people that they consume content from. Because I think when you share, like, because you're starting this journey now of building your personal brand, when you talk about you all the time, or you talk about what you do all the time, it's just one perspective, you know? So I think for me, I try to make it more of an effort to bring other people into my brand and hear their perspective on this industry or this life, or, you know what I mean? Because it really does shift the perspective from people watching your content to like, oh, that's really cool that I didn't know that they went to this high school, or I didn't know that they played for this team, or I didn't know, like, one thing people are surprised to learn about you is that you used to play hockey, you know, like, because a lot of women, that's not a common sport for them. So that's why I asked the question.
I see. No, it's a good question to ask. And I think we spend so much time communicating our interests and the businesses that we, you know, or careers that have led us to where we are now. We know all the backstories. We had conversations, we're just bouncing ideas off each other, maybe agreeing, maybe not agreeing, maybe like suggesting other things. I've seen, you know, and you've seen me like not have a job, figure out what my next job is going to be, and, you know, vice versa. So I think the biggest thing that sticks out for me, and like, I think it comes a lot from like the upbringing that we have from our family, and like just in general, like our mother and father, and like just our family in general, that we're surrounded by so many people that love to create, love to express themselves, love to, you know, try new things. They're not held back. It's almost like a competition between our family of like, who can do the coolest job, who can do the coolest thing. Like, but it's not even a competition. It's more so like the support. Like, it's like
everyone I talk to always like says, oh my gosh, all of your family is in marketing. I'm like, that's just how, that's
artists,
just, creative. Like, that's just how it turned out. I think that apples don't fall too far from the tree. I think that, you know, it's so important to, when you're trying to get to know someone, to kind of tap into the community, the village that raised them, you know?
Yeah. And we had, you know, very young age working in our grandmother's craft shops, and on the weekends going with her and mom and our aunts and cousins all,
I'm telling you,
in tow.
Joanne fabrics will always be, that scent will always be embedded in my life, in my brain forever, because it's like, that's something that like you don't forget. You don't forget, like, when you have multiple sensations at once, but then you have such an emotional attachment to them, it's something that you can't, like, you will probably forget what you bought, you will probably forget which location, but it's like you will not forget the brand, you know?
Yeah. And we had so much influence and so much like that we were shown. And obviously we both probably took things very differently, or maybe the same, I don't know. But it helped kind of mold like where we are today, or how our mind kind of works. Like, I think just even our mom making our Halloween costumes, like hand sewing, and, you know, same with dad supporting whatever, you know, recording whatever event and talent show we did.
That's so, you know, what's interesting is like the other day I saw somebody shared a video of people dancing in Detroit, and I was like, oh my God, we have so much footage of us as kids, because our father, our father used to film every single recital, every single school event, every single dance party. And it's like, at the time when you're a kid, you're like, stop filming me, you know, but then it's like you grow up and you really appreciate it, you know? And I think that that's another reason why I'm so like pro like documenting everything and not worrying about like what it presents or how it looks to the world, because your great grandkids that watch it will get to experience who you actually were, and not this picture perfect like curated image of who you wanted the world to see you as, you know?
Yeah, no, that's true. But I think going back to your question, like the thing that sticks out to me is you knew from a very young age like what you wanted. You had a vision, and like anyone, it takes a while for someone to get like what's in their head like out, or you know, have the resources to be able to execute things. But even if I didn't understand your vision, or didn't understand, or like any of our family member understood fully what you were trying to do, you always had a vision. You always knew exactly what you were going to do, and didn't really let anything kind of steer you out. Like, and that had to be hard. And I think that's what stands out too, is that it was hard. It was hard to like grow up and, you know, as an older sister, wanting to make sure you're okay. Like, you know, throughout like, when you left college, like, are you good? Like, are you getting a job? Are you this? Like, what does that look like? And then obviously the influence of our parents, like, you need to get a job, or you need to do this. Or like, when I first started working in sports, my dad was like, what are you playing the baseball on the team? What are you doing? Like, and I think that like families of immigrants, or people that may not know the culture, or like just the American kind of grind culture, don't know that's something. And maybe it's scary for them. They come here and they're like, they want the best for their children. And in that time, maybe the best for your child was they got to become a doctor, or a lawyer, or this, or whatever. So I'm grateful that our parents let us explore those kind of things and try different areas. But I did see like, you know, snippets here and there of them like, oh, kind of, this isn't working out for you. Maybe you should try something different, or, you know, whatever. And it wasn't so much out of like, they were not encouraging. They were just like, I know.
They just want the best.
Yeah, have the best
for you.
And care for your well-being. So that really sticks out to me. And just, you know, your creativity and what you've created. We're sitting in your studio and it's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I know that our mother and father and our family is so proud of you. But I'm so grateful and honored to be here, but also to have been throughout your journey, like seeing this happen.
I love you.
Love you.
And I'm so proud of you. Like, honestly, you have been my example growing up. Like, you have been kind of like, I went to Michigan State because of you. I joined the brother fraternity of the sister sorority that you joined. Like, there was so much.
And you fought me so much on all those things.
Yeah. And then also, like, the whole reason, like, I went to the Tigers and, like, I followed you. You know, I followed you. So I think it's such important to, you know, acknowledge that and say like, thank you for being a positive influence for me, because if it wasn't for you, our mother, our father, who gave us so much positivity and love and support, we would not have been able to, like how you mentioned in the very start of this conversation, like your community, your culture is what made it possible for you to dream big. Like, I remember sitting in the hallway when our mom, after she just got out of college, like she just got out of college class, and she would like bring us along with her, sitting in this hallway. And I was like, what are we doing here? And then we just hear her with like, this was like before collabs were like trending on major, you know, streaming and radio stations. Our mom was singing in Spanish with a like a reggae rapper. And I was like, what? Like, this is so, like, what is happening? You know, like, but this is so cool, because this is something like something that you don't expect. And it's almost like too, like when you see your parent doing something that is so different from being a parent, it's almost like, oh,
they're people too.
They're human
They're
too.
human too.
You know?
Yeah.
So it really does give you that kind of freedom and that kind of confidence to go and do whatever you aspire to do in your life without any fear or hesitation or questioning, you know, because I have always been somebody growing up, and it hasn't been easy, because like there were times where I felt like I'm just different and people are not going to understand me. They're not going to get me. But at that time, I was like, I don't care. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out, you know?
And that's the thing. People, for so long and before social media, and I think that's another reason why it's so great, it exposes you to so many different type of people, so many different types of walks of life and styles and opinions and thoughts. Like, so that, you know, kid in a small town or, you know, in a family that everyone else thinks a certain way and you think differently or you look differently or you know, act differently, it opens up like that they're not alone. They're not alone. There's other people out there like me and it's okay. And I think that that's the best thing that's happening with the shift of how, you know, things were so conservative and buttoned up, you know, 50 plus years ago. It's like we're finally kind of turning the needle a little bit on like what there's no expectations. Like it's everything's so fluid, everything's so like anything goes. And I think there's still a lot of, you know, want to even control that. Like but it's gonna be a battle of like just society and catching up with like what is new, what is now accepted. And it's like as generations, you know, transition out, like there's going to be new generations that bring in new ideas, new, you know, there's no traditional household anymore. There's no nuclear family anymore. There's no, like, it's like.
Yeah, but it's all the groundwork. Like everybody that did all the work for us to be where we are today, like all the work that we're putting in for the next generation to be able to do things and not think twice about like, do I have to worry about what men are going to say about what I'm wearing? Or do I have to worry about I'm maybe too brown for this, you know, industry? Or like, it's those questions are not even going to be a thought.
Yeah. But think about how, like, you know, even though we know this and we're present in our mind of knowing it, how many times do you catch yourself like, oh, does this look like, does this look like, and I'm the same way. So it's like, I understand that even if I'm at this level and like I accept it and I'm like encouraging it and really like happy for it, there's still years of like influence that have to like kind of start to fade away.
It's just, I just want everybody to remember that like 200 years from now, there's going to be a whole new population of people. And in a way, I was going to say, you'd be lucky if nobody remembers you, but you know, people would feel the opposite. Like you want to be remembered forever. But I will say it this way. You'll be lucky if people only remember the good things that you left behind in this world.
That's what we should all aspire to. Like there's no real, you know, as humans, we need to leave this earth better than when we got here. Is, you know, love is the whole world. Like love leads us, you know, in your passions, in your career, in your family, in your life. Like with everything going on, I think, you know, fear out the window, lead with love, lead with like, you know, what your heart wants. 'Cause at the end of the day, like nothing else matters. It's what is going to make you happy during your time here.
Well, I love you. And thank you so much for being here.
Love you. Thank you for having me.